And now, ladies and gentlemen, for a very epic Scumbag of the Week section. And we really had an epic show last week. So many scumbags, almost feel therapized. And now we have to start again every week with new ones.
That it's like, well, who's left? We covered almost everybody. But then there's never a shortage of scumbags. Someone pops up every week.
Always. And if you just watch the comments on the episode last week, people came up with many, many new recommendations. So, Shoshana, who is your scumbag this week?
My scumbag is someone I had never heard of until just now. They are the Hind Rajab Foundation, a Belgium-based anti-Israel organization that has submitted the names of 1,000 Israeli soldiers to the ICC, accusing them of crimes against humanity, systematic attacks on civilians, and genocide. And they went after an Israeli soldier who was, I suppose, vacationing in Brazil, who had survived the Nova massacre, and they tried to bring him in for crimes against humanity in Gaza. And all I hear is witch hunt. Witch hunt against the Jews around the world. And I don't know who you are, but you are not only my scumbag of the week, but you are the scumbag of the universe right now, going after someone who survived a genocidal attack in the Nova Festival and trying to bring him in for genocidal crimes. This is the backwardsness of the world today, and you represent all of that is evil and backwards in the world. So the Hind Rajab Foundation, I hope you go to hell.
What harm? I hope they get defunded. I hope they get kicked out of the country. Let's be practical. How can we bring these people down? That's the question.
Yeah, I hope it's a really good question. I hope our audience goes, figure it out, guys. Figure out how we can bring him down.
Whatever it takes.
I just want to note something really interesting about this witch hunt of Israeli soldiers. And that is that one of the reasons that European lawmakers in particular, also Australia and US argued for this before, and Canada, one of the reasons they didn't want to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization in these countries, their justification for not doing so, which of course we know is more about financial, but they said it's because it's a draft. Iran has a mandatory draft. And so there are people, even people who have defected, who are against the regime, that could be liable for the terrorist activities of the IRGC. So how can we ban the IRGC if that means that everyone who's ever served in the IRGC is going to be a target? So it's so much of a concern when it comes to the world's largest sponsor of global terrorism, including on foreign soil in Europe. But when it comes to the most oppressed minority in the history of mankind, the Jewish people, no. All that goes out the window. Arrest anybody who goes anywhere that ever served in a mandatory army.
Citizens
outrageous.
Which is basically in a democracy. And so, of course, it's outrageous, ridiculous. And as we know, double standards, as always. Barb.
My scumbag of the week, even though, again, I don't love that term, is Michael Moore. I know it's been a long time since you actually did movies that were at the movie theater, and you're really trying to make money, and, maybe you lost a few pounds. Sorry, I don't mean to be gross, but someone must be paying your bill. I saw you had a wonderful interview on Al Jazeera the other day talking about how the slaughter must stop in Gaza.
We should not be trying to increase the slaughter. We should not be funding the war. I think, most Americans have no problem with making sure that there are no more Israelis killed and providing for the defense. But that's really not what's going on right now. How do you justify the slaughter of children?
Before you do that, maybe you should just, come over and take your very white-looking face into Gaza and really see it for yourself, because I don't know what you're watching. If you're just watching Al Jazeera or just watching BBC, something's wrong with you. I mean, clearly something is a little bit wrong with you. But I want you to come for Shabbos and want to teach you about all the Jewish values that you're missing out on, because you don't realize how powerful you are. And when people watch you and, you have this cult following, there's major issues. And I pray that you don't see the effects of all the disinformation that you're selling.
Well, I pray that he does see it and understand what harm he's doing. And I think, Barb, you should start the Scumbag Rehabilitation Program, starting with Shabbos.
I'll bring you to Haram. Come to my Shabbos.
Emily.
So my scumbag this week is, it's a person, but really it's a group of people with a certain way of thinking. I had an interview on, when I was anchoring this week with Gershon Baskin. And, you know, he started talking about how it was not, in fact, it's not, in fact, Hamas that's the obstacle to a hostage deal. It's Israel, because Israel has rejected multiple offers by Hamas to release all the hostages in exchange for the end of the war.
Hamas's demands have included an end to the war and Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and they are willing to release all the 100 hostages in exchange for that, with, of course, the release of Palestinian prisoners. But Israel has refused to end the war or to withdraw from Gaza. So this is one of the points that we're blocked on. Another point is that Israel is demanding a veto on 60 or 65 names of Palestinian prisoners to be released. Hamas doesn't agree to that. Israel wants to deport Palestinian prisoners who will be released. Hamas doesn't agree to that. Hamas has been demanded to present a list of 32 or 34 living hostages that would be released in the first release. Hamas says that they are not able to do that. Iran is not involved in these negotiations, and Hamas doesn't take instructions from Hamas. You said that this is a Hamas, Iranian-sponsored organization. It's not. They receive support from Iran.
I would say $100 million annually is pretty big support from the Islamic regime in Iran, and in fact, both sides agree on that.
Now, what he didn't mention, of course, is that end of the war, according to Hamas, means something entirely different to them than it does to everyone else. One of the examples of this, just one, is the fact that end of the war, according to Hamas, at one point meant that Hamas maintains control of the Philadelphia corridor, which is essentially the border between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. It's one of the primary ways in which they have imported thousands of weapons and God knows what else into Gaza. Obviously, there is no reason whatsoever that it should stay in the hands of Hamas. It endangers the Palestinian people, it endangers the Israeli people, and it's completely unjustifiable militarily and in terms of security. That is not an end to the war. So to define it as such is absurd. And this is what we continue to see from people with this ideology. They're so quick to blame Israel without actually looking at what the details of this is. And then just to put the cherry on top, in this same interview, Gershon decided to argue with me about Hamas being a proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran, tried to claim that they're not, in fact, a proxy, which is, of course, insane. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and training and weapons that have been sent to Hamas through the Islamic Republic of Iran or from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And it's absurd for anyone to claim otherwise. And there's no reason for anyone to claim otherwise other than trying to sanitize this image of Hamas as this freedom-fighting, independent Palestinian cause that simply wants betterment for the Palestinian people. This war is not about a Palestinian state. Hamas does not stand for a Palestinian state. In fact, they've damaged any prospect of it for the next, foreseeable future, several decades at least. This is not what this conflict is about. It's a conflict that is motivated, inspired, and funded by the Islamic regime in Iran and other Islamist friends, despite the fact that they are a Sunni organization and that Iran is a Shia regime. They are a part of the Shiite axis and this new axis of evil, and it isn't something that we should be mincing words about. So anybody who's doing that, anybody who's looking at Israel and saying Israel is the problem in a hostage negotiation is delusional and should seek help. That's it.
Amen, sister. And I have to say, Emily, I saw the interview. I love the way that you shut it down. But also, his argument was so moronic because the Shias, the Iranian regime, have been using Sunni jihadists for decades. It's not a new tactic. They, of course,
even the revolution. The Palestinian Liberation Organization was on the ground in Iran.
There's a joke that the Iranians will fight to the last Arab because they're not Arabs and they don't care. But they use the Sunni jihadists, and that was a terrible argument on his side. But also, I want to just, to your point, and it goes, of course, beyond people like that, but the worst thing about it is that Gershon Baskin goes on international media, because I've been with him. I've followed him on some international media. I've been with him on panels on international media. And he basically goes around the world, unfortunately, telling people that it's Israel's fault that there's no hostage deal.
This has been doing this for years.
Yeah, this is now, and the worst thing is that I spoke to him straight after October 7th as the only person that I knew who could even have any type of insight on what would happen to the hostages. And he said to me from that first day, I don't have any hope that the hostages are going to come back. And so he's changed his tune. And now, of course, trying
publicly
change his tune. And of course, trying to put himself as the Mashiach again, because you have two friends who maybe still speak to you who are in Hamas. And, but Emily did a fantastic job of basically just saying, no, I'm not going to accept your contention, shut him down, kicked him out of the interview. So it's on to you. All right. So my scumbag of the week are also perennial scumbags, I think, for many years. Amnesty International. This organization, which purports to care about human rights, is definitely, I would say 90% of their work is just focused on
Israel.
On Israel's enemies, propping them up, and basically painting us as the people who are perpetrating human rights, which, of course, as we know, is a complete distortion of reality. They do this again and again. They just came out with another report, terrible memes that are just poisoning people's minds, coming up with false data. But, I want to bring to everyone here, because we get a lot of pushback and say, well, what, you can't criticize Israel? And it's not anti-Semitism. We get this in our comments all the time from all of us here. We get this in our comments all the time. Why can't you criticize Israel? Anybody who says anything against Israel is what? Is anti-Semitic? And I want to go back to Natan Sharansky's very smart 3Ds definition of when anti-Israel or criticizing Israel crosses over to anti-Semitism. And that is this: delegitimization. In other words, Israel doesn't have a right to defend itself because we were attacked. We didn't start this war. And somehow we don't have the legitimacy, even though there was a massacre, mass raping, killing of children, all of that, we have no legitimacy to go and dismantle the threat that still exists in our southern border, northern border, or anything else. So one is delegitimization. The second is demonization. And this is what we see over and over. And this is where anti-Semitism is different to other races, is racism. Because it's not like, oh, you're looking down on people of different color. With anti-Semitism, it's about the fact that we're demons. We have evil intentions, which is really the whole Goebbels thing about the Jews controlling the world. That is what we see today in Amnesty International, in CARE, in all of these organizations, in SJP. They're not just saying, oh, well, they're defending themselves and maybe, no, they're saying that we have evil intentions, and that is the basis of the lie of genocide, because you need intention for genocide. So demonization is evil intention, not just that we're trying to defend our homeland with our wonderful kids who are putting their lives on the line to defend our homeland. No, we're demons. And the third, and this is the one that gets me all the time, and it's so obvious but nobody sees it seems, double standards. In other words, Assad can kill 500,000 of his own people, not a peep, not a protest, nothing happens, certainly no ICC arrest warrants. The Yemenite, the Houthis, like Emily mentioned last week, there's starvation going on, planned starvation. Well, Hamas, of course, is starving their own people. With the food that we're sending them, they're still using it as a weapon of war against their own people, but nobody says anything. And ultimately, double standards is anti-Semitism. It's part of the IHRA definition. So anybody who's still doubting whether legitimate criticism of Israel, when at that point it crosses over, Natan Sharansky's the 3Ds, delegitimization, demonization, and double standards, that's when you know it's anti-Semitism. Amnesty International, you're a scumbag because you are the classic. You've gone over these 3Ds many, many years ago. A lot that came out there. Sorry. Okay, now for the healing part. You haven't had the healing part yet. Because last week was the full Scumbag episode. Who are our heroes this week? Bob, let's start with you.
Okay. My hero for the week is Scott Jennings from CNN, because this is the first voice I've heard in a really long time. I was here in
on mainstream media.
On mainstream media. I was here in 2001 when there was the quote unquote Jenin massacre, and I watched Ashley Banfield scream about in Jenin about how the Jews were cutting off the water for the Arabs. And I was sitting here in seminary and I was thinking to myself, but wait a second, I'm here and I know Palestinians and I've made friends with some of them. And that's what she's saying. Some of it's not true. And it was that moment where I went, why do we need 24-hour news? And if we do, why aren't we having one night a week where we're talking about the actual history and current modern day history of what's been going on in the land? And I kind of shut off the mainstream media in 2001. I was early.
Early adopter.
Yeah. And so, thank God for shows like this, like The Quad, which is such a dream to be here, where there's actual sense and logic and balanced conversation about what's really going on in the world. And women have a voice. Scott Jennings, God bless you. I've heard someone on that channel actually reflecting the values of America, of the West, saying what's really going on. You support Israel. Thank you so much. I'm loving reading your tweets or your X's or whatever you want to call it. So, God bless you. I'm finally watching clips from CNN because of you.
Oh,
Wow, yeah.
There's a, in the noise, there are some, I think Van Jones is there too.
Yeah.
I think Van Jones is there too.
Now. Maybe not in the past, but now.
Yeah.
It's like he's
Now,
Educated.
Shoshana, who's your hero?
My heroes are actually 150 Haredi or Ultra-Orthodox soldiers who just drafted to the IDF, the new Haredi Brigade. And the reason they're my heroes, because obviously soldiers are our heroes, but they're my heroes because it is very hard for Haredim, the Ultra-Orthodox, to draft within their society and still really be within that society. Meaning a lot of times when you step out of the rules that are set for you by leadership in Haredi society, you are no longer Haredi, which is what women have to deal with all the time. The minute that a woman says, no, I think I should be able to run for this, well, she's not really Haredi. So the fact that these men are doing this, understanding that there is a war, understanding that we have a severe shortage of soldiers and that families are collapsing due to it, and saying, I know that my leadership, I know that my community is against this, but I feel like this is the right thing to do, is tremendous. And I hope that the 150 grows to 15,000 to 50,000, because we need you. You're part of the society. You're part of Am Yisrael, and we need you on the front lines and next to us and not fighting us, God forbid. I don't want to see that anymore. I would love to see us together, both in the army and without. So thank you for being my heroes this week.
And they're extra heroes because many of them end up becoming lone soldiers because their parents won't have them back. And so many of them go against their families and they don't have their mom, doing their laundry and giving them packed food to take.
There are younger soldiers and 100 older Haredi men who have joined in Miluim.
That's really nice.
Which is a really big deal.
It's a huge...
To whatever, right, whatever. Whether if you need a cook, if you need a driver, you need a whatever, I'm serving even if I'm not 18, I'm not 22. And I think that's an amazing role model position for a Haredi man to take. So Ken Yerbu, as we say.
Well done. Yeah. Emily, who's your hero?
So my hero this week is actually Brianna Wu. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but...
This woman.
Yeah, she's
coming.
She better be. I told her, come visit Israel.
Yes.
And no, she's my hero this week because this is someone who has worked in a lot of progressive spaces for many years on the political side. She's been a big activist for many progressive causes over the years. And since October 7th, as she has learned more about this conflict and seen sort of the really horrendous behavior of the anti-Israel movement, I won't even call it pro-Palestinian, but the anti-Israel movement on the streets in the United States, she's sort of come to realize that this obsession, this regressive Islamist mentality that's sort of motivating these radical pro-terror protests is not progressive.
Yeah.
And she has taken so much heat for this on social media. It is unbelievable how much I've seen this woman attacked viciously by anti-Semites, despite not being Jewish at all.
Yeah.
And, despite that, she stood her ground. And she's really dug her heels in and educated herself on this issue. And she has reservations about certain things in Israel, as many of us do as well. She has been really a fearless, outspoken advocate for justice and for truth when it comes to what's happening on the ground here in Israel, and unashamedly calling out the radical anti-Israel and pro-terror groups, whether on social media or on the streets in the United States. So kol hakavod to you. Please come visit us in Israel. You're welcome anytime. We'll have you on the quad.
Yeah, can we have her on the show?
She's willing. We're down.
Brianna, I hear you're coming. So please, this is an open invitation to be one of our co-hosts on the show.
It's really fun. I'm keeping the seat warm.
Good. All right. So my heroes is another unit of the army, and it's the unit which is my age. Yes. The over 45s.
So 25?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, darling. Thank you. It's the over 50s, but there are some over 45s as well. Some of them are family friends of mine, people who have grandchildren in some cases.
Wow.
And essentially, for their souls and for their own sense of doing something meaningful, they decided that, there's an ex-politician here decided to advance the idea of a more mature unit, platoon, or whatever they call it in army terms. And there's been a few, actually. Yoaz Hendel is one of the ex-Israeli politicians who advanced it. He's also 50-something. And he said, well, I don't know why I can't go back to Miluim, even though they retired me. And so since the beginning of the war, it started as a small little unit. It's grown. And I've got a good friend whose husband just recruited a few weeks ago. He's spending Shabbats in doing all sorts of duties in Gaza and other places. And the reason that it's so important is because these guys are basically relieving the younger guys. Like you said, it's been so difficult for these families to go home. There have been hundreds of days. They've got little children they haven't seen. Some fathers have shown up for the birth and then they haven't seen their baby for months on end. And what this unit is doing is these are older guys. They're all successful, high-tech fund managers, bankers, and they're putting everything aside. They're leaving their wives and children at home too, who are a little older, to go and serve their country, relieve these guys so that they could go home for a little bit to see their families. And so just like your Haredim are your heroes of the week, these older guys, my age, yes, we're in that category, are my heroes of the week because they didn't have to do any of it and they're running to serve their country. They're really stepping up. And those are the best. Exactly. People step up. Yeah. You know, people don't understand that I think we're the only country that people fly in for a war. You know, people were trying to get tickets to get back after October 7th. And we had 150% reserve duty. Soldiers show up and say, take me. I don't care what you do with me, but take me. We're fighting for our country. And that is why in the end, we will prevail. That and the fact we have a very high birth rate. But we will prevail. Because we have people, as opposed to different countries around the world, when the intifada gets globalized to them, let's see how many of them show up to fight for their country. We have none of those problems because we have people who care, who love, and are willing to put their lives on the line, and are putting their lives on the line for the country. And that's what makes us going to be more than surviving, but thriving.
Yes, man.
And so we pray, and maybe this week we're closer than ever, but we pray that all our hostages, all of them, come home to their families very soon. Thank you from all of us. Thank you for watching.